Let's go, people, let's go. It's prognosis negative time.
Hi, this is Eric, and welcome back to Prognosis Negative Presents Cinema Quickie number 12. This is Godzilla Minus One. I don't know if everyone's heard of this movie, but this is a Toho Japanese Godzilla movie. The last time we had one that was live action was 2016 with Shin Godzilla. If you're a G fan, then you're familiar with these movies, and Shin Godzilla was really considered like a bringing back, almost like a reboot of the franchise as far as the Japanese side was concerned. And many people hoped that they would carry on with sequels to Shin Godzilla, but it was announced quite some time ago that they were going to come out with a wholly new reboot of sorts. And this movie coming out now at the tail end of 2023 is almost like a 70th anniversary celebration type movie. I guess technically it's the 69th. But in my mind now, I'm kind of tying this in with next year's Monsterverse, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. I think it's sort of like a 2-year celebration. At least that's how I'm thinking about it. Not to mention the Apple TV Monsterverse series, which is also currently streaming right now. This movie just released in the United States on December 1st. And early reviews out there have been extremely positive. And I noticed the hype almost right away on social media. So I had to go check it out for myself. As I am purportedly a huge G fan myself, there's currently 38 films that exist in the franchise officially. That's counting Japanese plus American releases. And to date, I think I've seen 36, and I own them all and have for a while now. So I guess it was mandatory that I go check this out. Now, this movie being called Minus One is a prequel of sorts in the sense that it takes place chronologically prior to anything that we have seen in the Japanese films. But at the same time, it's not a prequel in the Star Wars prequel sense, meaning it's not designed to be, oh, this is going to set up many things you're going to see in the movies that already exist, catch all the references and all the extra backstory. It's not really a prequel in that way. While there are little Easter eggs and suggested references, especially to the very original Godzilla movie from 1954, but it's not, it's really standalone at the same time, even though it is technically in some version of the Godzilla universe at large. I noticed throughout the film that they were probably working with a modest to small budget. I've checked the figure now, and it's much lower than I ever would have expected. I believe the film had a budget of $30 million. But I'm not saying this is a bad thing. And the scope of the story concerning the human characters is much more tightly focused than your typical Godzilla movie. Usually, Godzilla movies tend to be ensemble pieces. And while there are some ensemble characters, it's really more focused on a small set, a particular grouping. And I actually kind of like this. And it's not just the smaller cast or smaller primary cast, but there's a smaller scope of the story and the setting overall. By the way, I'm being slightly vague because I don't want to spoil this movie for people who haven't seen it yet. But it's a little more concentrated in scope, and I actually thought that was also a good thing. Now, I will say for me, I don't know if it's because it's late at night. By the way, I just got out of the movie after 1 a.m., and it is really cold out here in the parking lot right now. But there were moments that dragged a little bit because, like a lot of Godzilla movies, there were certain elements of the plot as I was watching it that seemed predictable and kind of went the way I thought they would. So there were some slower moments in the film where I felt like I was tuning out a bit. And there were also times where I thought, I don't understand the hype, all the positive hype out there, because I don't dislike this movie, but I need more to happen, or I need more to the story. This was just my general feeling as I was sitting there going through it. But one thing that always made me perk up whenever it happened, and there's a couple significant moments when it does, is of course the score for this movie heavily features the trademark iconic Godzilla movie that was there from the very first film. And it hits so hard. It is, aside from the atomic fire blast, that shouldn't be a spoiler, the old school score / theme has got to be one of the loudest things in the movie, which for the large part is actually not even that loud through most of the runtime. But when that score hits, it is loud, it is deep, it is booming. And if you know the iconic Godzilla theme, it is incredible. It is absolutely incredible. And they saved it for some of the best parts of the movie. And that was overall the coolest element, and those were the coolest parts of the movie for me, where I was completely locked in. This being a modest budget Japanese film, obviously a kaiju film, it's going to be effects heavy. And if you've watched like all the American Godzilla movies and the more recent Japanese ones, there's obviously a technological gap as far as CGI is concerned. There always has been. But I will say, for the Japanese films, they're coming along, or they've been coming along. Shin Godzilla was a step in the right direction, and you can tell that they've even improved a bit since then. It's not going to be up to your US film standards if that's what you're mostly used to watching. It's not up to that level. But in the Toho world of Godzilla movies, it's perfectly fine, and it's a sign that things continue to progress so that gap in visuals between the US content and the Japanese content continues to shrink. So as I said, there were parts of the movie and plot that were dragging for me here and there. You know, this movie is, I think, 2 hours, 10 minutes, which is a bit long for a Japanese Godzilla movie. Usually the sweet spot for a Toho Godzilla film is somewhere around 90 minutes, maybe an hour 45. So this one was a bit stretched out. And as I said, there was so much hype about surrounding this movie. You know, I was already past the 1 hour mark and thinking, all right, what's going to happen here? And I'll just say there were some unexpected twists that occur in the third act. And whatever rating score I had for the movie that I was kind of forming in my head, let's just say after witnessing the third act and having a few minutes to reflect on it before talking about it here now, I definitely boosted my score, all things considered. So how am I going to rate this? I'm going to rate it out of Kyushu J7W Shinden Fighters. And I'm walking away with a solid competence score of 4 out of 5 Kyushu J7W Shinden fighters. And I also have to say, if you consider yourself a G fan, or you're a big fan of Godzilla movies in general, or maybe you've only really watched the recent US Godzilla movies since 2014 and you're just curious what's going on out there with the Japanese Godzilla movies, this would certainly be a good place to start. If you're a G fan, you're absolutely going to love this movie. And if you really understand some of the history and backstory of the Godzilla character in general and what Godzilla means and represents for Japanese people and Japanese culture, if you kind of know some of that stuff going in, you will then understand why this movie is so highly acclaimed amongst fans and people in the know. So if you're a G fan, do yourself a favor, see this on the big screen, definitely go out and own it later. And if you're also a fan of the Legendary Pictures Monsterverse films, I am 3 or 4 episodes into the streaming series on Apple TV, and it's pretty good so far, if that's your thing. So there we go. And I cannot wait to talk about Godzilla X Kong next year. And closing out the show today, this is Eric. And until next time, the parking lot is yours.